This is Len. This photo was taken in 1925 on a school fancy dress day. I'm not entirely sure what he was dressed up as, but I suspect it was a good excuse to bring his pet parrot into school and cause a little bit of chaos. So I just want to share a little bit of Len's story with you to begin with. Len had a happy childhood. He grew up in Hampshire, but as a young man, war broke out, and aged 21, he signed up to the Merchant Navy as an electrician. He traveled the world, obviously not in ideal circumstances, but the silver lining was that along the way, he met Barbara. They fell in love, and during a period of leave during the war, they got married. Len happily survived the war, and when he got back, he and Barbara had 2 kids. We got Steve there on the motorbike, who was born in 1947, and a few years later, his brother Bill came along. Sadly, though, soon after this photo was taken, Barbara was diagnosed with a degenerative illness. Things went downhill fairly quickly, and about a year after this photo was taken, she passed away. It left Len as a single dad to 2 grieving young boys, needing to strike the balance of winning the bread with also bringing them up. This was the 1950s, and the role of childcare was simply not the man's responsibility, and particularly not an electrician of limited means living on a council estate. Len faced some strong pressure from society, from friends, from family to either ship the boys off to boarding school or to farm them off to other members of the family. But he made the bold decision, and in some ways the remarkable decision, that the best thing that he could do for them was, with the love and support of people around him, raise them himself. And that's exactly what he did. Here's the 3 of them away on holiday. And as they grew older, Steve was able to take more responsibility for his younger brother, and in effect they grew up as 3 brothers with an incredibly strong bond. Len was a remarkable man, and he did a great job with them. You may have guessed, but Len is my granddad, and Steve is my dad, and that's me in the middle, as you probably recognize. And I've been fortunate to have incredible fathering role models in my own life. So Steve, my dad, has caught on so much of that stuff from his dad, the love, the care, the attention. He's always been there for me. I've learned so much from them, and I feel incredibly fortunate. Fast forward to 2014, and it's my turn to become a dad. So this is me and my wife on the day that my son was born. When I wrote this talk, I wrote, this was the happiest, proudest day of my life, which it still is, but it's now the joint, because as of Monday, my wife had a little baby daughter. So it's now... Thanks, I didn't actually do much, to be honest, but just a few seconds. And this is us on the day he was born. It was an amazing day. We had him at home. So we were sitting on the sofa, and I just remember this moment feeling overwhelmed with love, with joy, with relief. My wife had been in labor for nearly 2 days. It had been so intense, but we got there, and our son was born. A couple of minutes, or a few minutes after this photo was taken, the midwife had to give my wife a couple of stitches, and my son got past me as I was holding myself for the first time. And I remember looking down at him, and it was incredible. The midwife said, "Can you put a nappy on him?" And I thought, yeah, I've done a nappy before. This is going to be okay. I can do that. So I managed to just about get the nappy on. I put it all through and managed to put that together. And he said, "Oh, he's going to get cold, before too long, so we should wrap him up. Can you put a babygrow on him?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I think so." So I took the babygrow, and literally I couldn't do it. It was like this unfathomable puzzle someone had given me. And I was putting his legs where the arms go, and the arms where the legs go, and the head was in the wrong place, and all that stuff. And I don't know if it's sleep deprivation or what, but I just couldn't do it. The midwife came across with a nice knowing look and said, "Do you want some help with that? I can help you with that." And she put the babygrow on my son, showed me how to do it, put it on, handed him back to me. And that was the first moment in my parenting life, about half an hour in, where I realized I really, really didn't know some of the stuff that I needed to know. That happens to me on a regular basis as a parent, but that was the first moment. Things were, however, about to get a little bit worse. Kind of very shortly after that, the midwife noticed some irregularities in my son's breathing, and my wife also collapsed a couple of times for good measure. We were blue lighted to hospital in an ambulance, rushed down there. I remember walking, my wife was in a stretcher. I walked down through these corridors, followed a doctor, put my son on a table. an army of consultants and doctors came around him with tubes, wires, pipes, all sorts, putting things down his throat. And I just stood back there. My wife was wheeled in a couple of minutes later, semi-conscious. And, I was in deep here. I didn't know what was happening. I was scared. And, basically, my son did have a problem. Happily, everything was sorted out. But this is the next day. This is my wife in a luxury hospital padded wheelchair, my son in intensive care. But those first few days of parenthood, it was all on me. And really, because my wife was somewhere, I had to do a lot of the stuff I didn't know. When we were in the hospital, we received the most incredible care and attention. And they showed me how to put on a babygrow, which I happily learned. They also showed me how to do everything that I could possibly need to know: burping, bathing, how to feed, how to support my wife with breastfeeding. It was incredible. And after a few days, my son came down from intensive care. We were able to hold him again, which was lovely. But I'd learned so much from these midwives. And I basically thought, wouldn't it be amazing if everyone, every dad, every parent had the opportunity to learn this stuff? Because no one teaches it to you. And I kind of parked that thought. I was fairly busy with other things and didn't know if I'd ever come back to it. I never really thought I would. We left hospital after about a week. And this is me with my son more recently in happy parenting mode in a good moment. And I've got to say, I've had just an amazing set of circumstances that have allowed me to be the kind of dad that I'd like to be. So I had a community of peers around me who I could lean on and look to for support. I had dads around me who were kind of ahead down the path, who'd been there and done it, who I could ask questions of, and who could grow with me and help me grow as a parent. I'd had this input and teaching that I talked about, and also had the opportunity and the time to grow skills and confidence and kind of grow into that role as a dad. Now, along the way, I also have met a number of dads who didn't have this stuff, or one of these things or a number of these things. Perhaps they're struggling with their confidence, perhaps they don't have those skills, perhaps they've got a difficult relationship, perhaps they haven't got a support network or the role models like I was fortunate enough to have. All dads struggling in all kinds of ways. I also met dads who had been let down kind of by the system, so to speak. So I remember meeting one dad when we were in hospital. He'd been through a long labor with his wife as well, and she'd ended up having a C-section. And he basically, about a few hours after his daughter was born, having been through a super intense experience, he was sent home from the hospital because it wasn't visiting hours, and he wasn't allowed to stay there. So after this time when he should be building bonds with his family, should be making lifelong memories, he was off in his flat on his own. And the message that he got, he wasn't needed, he wasn't important. Now, the maternity departments would love it to be different. Of course, they have limited resources. But there's so many stories of that, of dads getting those kind of wrong messages, daddy daycare, all that stuff. Those messages really get through. So there was the societal stuff, there was the kind of the dads I'd met, and then I started digging into some statistics, and I found actually the statistics really bear this out. So men who are more involved in their child's life, their partner is much more likely to have a better career, have better mental health and well-being, and is less likely to be discriminated against when it comes to pay, which is all great stuff. Equally, the kids. If a kid has a dad, they're much more likely to, in effect, get on better in life. So children who grow up fatherless are much more likely to have behavioral difficulties. They're much more likely to have emotional difficulties later in life. All the stuff that comes with that as well, of course, more likely to commit crime, more likely to drop out of school early, all that list. And that's totally borne out in my experience. So I used to be a youth worker. I've met countless children and young people from Brighton who have suffered because of poor or absent parents. And if I'm honest, particularly dads have been kind of guilty of that. So we invest all this money in kind of trying to remedy the effects of poor parenting, but how much do we actually invest in the parents themselves, especially in those crucial early days? And finally, I realized it would also have a super positive effect on the men to do this stuff. I read a survey. Over half of men feel completely unprepared for fatherhood. That's a real statistic. Over half of men feel completely unprepared for fatherhood. That seems incredible to me. So I felt I had to do something, and the thing that I did was the dad course. So the dad course is very simple. It's not complex. What we do is we bring dads to be together to prepare for fatherhood. We meet in a pub because that seemed like the right thing to do. It's a relaxed, positive space. It's a familiar space. And the whole idea is it's that normalizing thing again. It's a place where men can just be themselves. They don't have to pretend. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be that strong figure that so many men feel they should be. They can just be honest and upfront. One of our core values is to be totally BS-free, so they're not allowed to pretend, they have to be who they are. And we get all kinds of interesting conversations coming up around that, around the questions that they get, and around who they actually are as men and as dads. We also bring along experienced dads who have been there and done it to come and share their stories and talk about their experiences of being a dad themselves. So they'll talk about their transition into parenthood, how they found the birth, what's been good, what's been hard, all that stuff. And I remember one dad in particular coming in talking about his relationship with his partner, how much they were struggling, how tired they both were, how they weren't having sex anymore, never have any fun, and they were really having a hard time. And one of the guys who came on that course came and spoke to me a few months later, we were having a chat, and he said, do you know what? Some of the stuff he said was really helpful. Some of the tips about what he'd done differently was great. But above all, it was just so good to know that I wasn't alone in that and that I was connected to someone else in that. We also do really, really practical stuff. So all that stuff that I learned at the hospital, we do that together. Hopefully everything that a guy would want to know we'll cover. So all the nappy stuff, the clothing stuff, and tons more. How to be supportive at the birth, how to look after your partner well, how to look after yourself as a dad well. We do all of that stuff. So so far it's been a success, I'm happy to say. We started our first course in January, so it's still early days. But I feel like there's incredible potential. But what we're doing in Brighton I think is actually just scratching the need of a much deeper and a much wider need for dads. Hardly anyone is working with dads, and virtually no one is working with dads to be, and there's a massive gap to be filled there. And like I say, I think it can have a hugely positive impact on not just the dads, not just the partners, but also the children. So a number of dads have approached me and said, I wish that's something that I'd had when I was a dad myself. It's not something I've particularly initiated or sought out, but already we're having conversations about running the course in London, in Oxford, Southampton, and Littlehampton. So it seems like a little bit of momentum is happening there, which is very exciting. There's also the potential to maybe do some stuff online, or I know that for me as a dad, I'm far from the perfect dad. I still need support. I still need people to lean on, shoulders to cry on, people to ask questions of. So maybe we'll do something for people who are already dads as well. But to take it kind of all the way back to my granddad and where we started, my granddad basically had a choice to make. He was forced into it by his circumstances. He could either step up, get involved, get his hands dirty, or he could listen to all the reasons not to, all the societal pressures, all the difficulties that he was facing. But he decided to go for it. And actually, I don't know what kind of impact it would have had on my dad and on his brother had my granddad decided not to do that. They could easily have become one of those statistics that I mentioned earlier on. But they haven't, and that's had a huge positive effect on me and my siblings, and hopefully on my children too. I think that the dad course and this idea of helping men prepare for fatherhood, I want it to be for everyone. So we've had all kinds of dads coming along. Professionals, we've had people from all different backgrounds, we've had people from maybe more traditionally poorer backgrounds, but I'm so keen that this is something that could be for everyone. One example of that, a 15-year-old boy from Brighton recently got in touch with me. He wasn't able to make our course for various reasons, but he basically said, I'm becoming a dad, my girlfriend's pregnant, I'm up for it, which I think is amazing, but I just need someone to help me, I don't know how to hold a baby. And for me, it's like, wow, this is exactly the kind of people we want to be helping. We want to help everyone. We don't just want this to be a privileged middle-class opportunity. I think there could be a profound impact if all dads did this stuff. So I want to finish by sharing a little thought. There's been lots of interesting quotes today, and I've got one from Tolstoy. Classic dad stuff. Everyone thinks about changing the world, but very few people think about changing themselves. And I think it's easy to believe that societal change only happens at this high up, top level, which very few of us will ever see and very few of us will ever access, and it makes us feel powerless. Now, occasionally I think that's true, but I think on the whole, real change and real long-term sustainable change that isn't just temporary but lasts, it doesn't happen in that way. I think it happens in small, quiet, little places where we don't always see. And for me, that's what makes a dad course exciting. It's not big, it's not fancy, it's not something I've set out to make huge. It's just a group of guys sitting in a quiet pub side room, talking about that journey into fatherhood, being upfront, real and honest, and preparing themselves for what is, I believe, the most significant thing they'll ever do. My dream, my vision, my hope is that we're able to offer this opportunity to all dads. I think the impact could be totally profound, and all those little changes added together could have a huge impact, not just on the dads, not just on the mums, but on children for generations to come. Thanks.